and I can be removed.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Judy Dempsey. I'm the editor of Strategic Europe, which is under the umbrella of Carnegie Europe. And I'm delighted to have a great panel here. And this panel is a very special one. First of all, it's organized by the EU Horizon 2020 Engage project, and also by GLOBSEC, this great think tank in Slovakia under the CEE umbrella. And we have, which is very nice, we have two ladies on this panel instead of a whole huge panel where nobody can get a word in. And the first one is Ursula Plasnik, Federal Minister for European International Affairs in Vienna from 2004, 2008. And we're going to have very soon joining us, there's a bit of a technical issue, Ingrid Brokova. She was the former State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs in Slovakia from 2020 to 2023. So this is a special event because it really is about the role of women in problem solving, conflict resolution, wars, how to create dialogue. And there's been many seminars on this, but I think this is a particularly special one because of our panel. And I would like to go straight away and actually ask Ursula Plasnik, a very dear colleague that goes through, that I've known for many years, and ask her, given that sitting in Central Europe, in Vienna, I mean, just first of all, looking at the international environment and how this actually feeds into the role of women. First of all, Ursula, a brief word, if that's at all possible, about the international environment, which is not very optimistic at the moment. And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Judy, and thank you to all the participants for their attention. Now, what comes to my mind when you ask me about the international situation and women in particular right now is that it throws us back to Resolution 1325, which is the basic United Nations resolution about women, peace, and security with the two branches. And it's not outdated. It's something we live in everyday life now with these two aspects of protecting women and children on one side and on the other side, making them participate. Participation for me is a logical follow-up, a logical consequence of democratic representation. And we're still far away from having the women's voices heard equally strongly in international affairs. But when I think about what I live here in Vienna, it is the women of Ukraine who come to my mind. I keep meeting them in various discussion fora. I keep talking to them. I must say I continue to be deeply moved and touched by their courage, by the way they represent their country, the difficulties they are living, they and their children. Sometimes they bring their children with them while they are working here in Vienna or somewhere else in Europe or in the world, to make heard the voices of not only the women, but all of those who are going through this very, very difficult moment in time after Putin's aggression. So this brings to my mind, because I see these wonderful women, I see the job they are doing, I see their worries, their need, their security requests, and we cannot possibly close our eyes in front of what we live with them.
That's a really good point, Ursula. And not only the incredibly brave women in Ukraine, and even since the Maidan back in 2004, so many may have already forgotten it. I mean, women were the driving force there, but they actually mobilized the civil society, the anti-corruption movements, the self-help movements, making sure that the independent civil society looked after children and women and men as well. I mean, it was inclusive, but it was very, very important how women were the driving force. And Ursula, I'd like to hear your experience also about the women in Belarus and poor old Belarus has fallen off the map.
That's what I have just noted, Judy, while you were responding to my first intervention. Of course, it's not only about Ukraine, it's about Belarus, it's about the incredibly courageous women who have stepped in, literally not prepared for doing this outright, into the steps of their partners, of their husbands who have been put into prison, who are political prisoners, who come to mobilize us and to give us an credible insider glimpse of what's going on in their country. So again, I want to pay homage to them and recall to all of us how important it is to support these women.
Can we just, before we move on to a different theme about women and security, Ursula, we should move down to Moldova as well, where women have been very active in the government and civil society and trying to push back the oligarchs, trying to deal with corruption, trying to galvanize independent civil society and a younger generation of women. This is an element that is sometimes forgotten as well, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it is also an extremely complex issue because I've been to Belgrade after a long break, so to say, last summer, and I met Sonja Licht. You remember Sonja?
Yeah, of course.
So, you know, I see the fierce battle of women, young women, motivated women. I see also that we ask the impossible of them, and we should be very careful here because we can only, you know, we cannot compensate in a way by over requesting from them what nobody has so far been able to achieve. There is an awful amount of resistance, and it comes not from the gender side, but from the power structures. Indeed. Nobody, in my experience, who's ever had an inch of power is going to give it up for free and voluntarily. So this is very much of it is a power struggle, and it's a struggle, a very fierce struggle against structures who have been established for a very long time, who are very hard, who are extremely difficult to even make public, transparent, because that's the first step to bring things out into the open. So we should not underestimate the obstacles women face, not only obstacles, but the walls, walls of structures that are outlived, outdated, and need change. They need, the women need the men to come along and work together.
That's a very good point, Ursula. And we see this, maybe it was a hearing issue. I brought up Moldova as well.
Yes.
And we see young women actually involved there, which is interesting in Moldova. The diaspora of both men and women are going back. And because of their experience, having worked wherever, whether it was in France or Sweden or Germany or Britain, they come back, and with their experience, they can work together, not compete with each other, and try to rebuild governments in tandem with the civil society. I don't want to be idealistic. Moldova, Belgrade, Bosnia, they've such a long way to go. Albania, Kosovo, Macedonia, you name it, such a long way to go. But I think when I listen to what you're saying, we cannot underestimate the role of the diaspora trying to come home. And in some ways, if the EU cannot extend the big Erasmus programs to these countries, maybe because the civil service pay is so miserable in these countries, maybe there could be a way of subsidizing the civil service pay as an incentive for this talented younger generation which left the country and would come back and try to rebuild the institutions. The institutional statecraft is just so important for these countries.
Well, Judy, two remarks from my side. I think you're absolutely right, and it's one of my personal big hopes. It's not an open issue yet, but it should be made a big issue, and that is the comeback. I'm not sure whether I would call them diaspora, because that is a word that is historically charged. You know, come back home. It's very much natural for human beings after a while, after having been abroad, after having received your education or even left with your education and worked somewhere else, to come back. I'm now 67, so I've just recently returned to my home country, Austria, after 12 years abroad. And I can see what it means, how important it is emotionally. And I really think that the people who've made, we are 30 years after the fall of the Iron Curtain. So a lot of young people who have left are now coming closer to retirement age. And they want to maybe go back and share their experience and to contribute to the rebuilding of institutions, of civil society. And we should do everything to support them. Now, the question is, and that's my second remark, whether financing in part or increasing the salary of public service is the right way to do that. I'm not enough of an expert because civil service can be an obstacle as much as it can be a driver of change. So we should be very careful not to do the wrong thing and give the wrong incentive. The European Union has a bad track record also of supporting the wrong structures and even creating, in many cases, or in some cases, the wrong structures. I was drawn to this aspect of development by the Swiss ETH, the technical university, not of Zurich, but of Lausanne. They have a specific program at the time, they told me, to give incentives to Croatian scientists to come back to Croatia and continue their work. Because we've all made, and Austria is up front there, we've all made the experience of opera singers, artists, scientists, teachers, all kinds of people from all over Eastern Europe, Eastern to Southern Europe, coming to Austria, working here, gaining fantastic experience, contributing to our success. And why not support them now, specifically in their area of competence, in their area of expertise, to help advancing their home societies, if you want. I think that might be a better, I haven't found the right expression yet, but diaspora, I know what you mean.
Yeah, yes, it's the wrong word because diaspora has different connotations. They have not been driven
out of their countries. They have left because they anticipated probably, as a lot of people would have, that for their lifetime, change would come at a too slow pace. I imagine, that might have been one of the motivations.
Before we get on to the issue and task, in my own country, I mean, so many of my Irish compatriots left, but they've come back. They goes ebbs and flows, but they know they can always go home. And I think now, do we have our next representative? Do we have Ingrid Brokova? No, she's not there yet. Ulrich, Ursula, I wanted to ask you, going back to the topic of our conversation today, in your long experience as a diplomat, what sort of difference do women make actually in negotiating practices or in dealing with negotiations or conflicts? Do they make, what distinguishes them if they have the opportunity to be involved?
The older I get, Judy, the more I think that it's all a matter of bringing in different voices and perspectives. And I experience in my own professional life, even outside the conflict zone, in my comfortable zone, I experience the fact that women and men have different approaches to the same subject, and that it's always a cause of surprise for the men when they start listening to sometimes still the only woman in the room. And I think that over the last decades, the listening capacity of men, to be honest, has improved. That's my personal experience, but also the courage of women to present their points of view, even if they have to accept or expect resistance or surprised faces at the beginning, or sometimes are given the feeling that they're not taken entirely seriously. So it takes courage to overcome that space in that buffer zone in communication, in intergender communication, if I may say so. And that is also so important for conflict resolution management, to have the different perspectives and experiences at the table. Women are the ones who have still have specific tasks in society. There's nothing much you can change about that. So they have different experiences. They come from a different angle of observation. And it is absolutely necessary to have these observations and this analysis. It's not about emotions. It's not about feelings. It's about a very rational analysis of what societies need.
Absolutely.
I have been told by the African peacemaker women that ask a woman and she will talk about the needs of her group, of her society for tomorrow. Talk about men, listen to the men in conflict resolution, and they will go over the issues they went to war for. So this is maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but it still highlights the difference of approach that should be that we all should be aware of in conflict management, conflict resolution, in negotiations.
Thank you for this, Ursula. We will definitely go back to this issue. Do we have Ingrid Brochova on the line? Yes, I think you're still muted. I think you're muted. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hey,
Can
hello.
you
Yes,
yes, finally,
nice to see. Yes, nice to see you. We were keeping the space ready, knowing that you would join. Thank you very much. And we had to start the conversation, of course. But Ingrid, if I may, thank you for joining us. And I'm afraid I have to get deep inside it very quickly, because we want to throw this out to the so-called virtual floor, if anybody's any questions. But I mean, you had a very, I was going to say, difficult time, but being state secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European and Foreign Affairs in Bratislava until 2023, and now look what's happening to your country. I was wondering, given your experience in this post and previous experiences, what was the most challenging in your view? I don't want to just say as a woman, but trying to bring the whole ministry together and promote a special kind of outlook for Bratislava inside the EU, but for the domestic opinion as well. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Finally, I managed to be connected. I'm sorry for that, but really very good afternoon, pleasant afternoon from Prague. And first of all, thank you very much for this debate, because
you're from Prague.
This kind of discussion, there is never enough of this kind of discussions, and I think these days these discussions are very timely, because we have war in Ukraine, we have conflict in Middle East, so we need more peace, and we need more women in diplomacy, because when it comes to the negotiations about peace, I think there has been confirmed that when peace agreements are negotiated by women, they are more durable, and so we need more women in diplomacy in the public life. And as you have said, I've been 3 years in the position of the State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I thought that that's the only diplomacy which still doesn't have sufficient representation of women in the decision-making the positions. but it's not true. And let me make 3 points about this. First is the horizontality that really I took it as a mission when I was the state secretary to devote the time to this agenda, to promote the equal opportunities for women, because horizontality is the challenge. It's not only the diplomacy, but all other professions, justice, healthcare, education, we can name it. And when we speak about the women, and you were asking me about the most challenging agenda, it is the fact that we are majority, but we speak about women as a minority. And it is about utilizing the 50% of talent of society for our ambitions and to achieve our goals. So that's why, as a state secretary, deputy minister, I devoted a lot of time to this agenda, how to make institution better, more effective, more inclusive, and with the equal opportunities, and in the end, with the better culture, corporate culture.
Ingrid, what was the reaction to what you wanted to do?
Yes, that's a very, very good question, to the point, and it's always. I think the challenge is to internalize certain policy in the institution, because you can go as fast as the institution is capable to absorb the new policies, new approach, new culture. And we have had quite often very lively discussion, even among women, that how fast we can go. Because if you don't have everybody on board for the changes, then there is a risk that with the change of the administration, there could be a different approach applied, and there is a risk that all effort what was put into the change of the policy or in the change of the system and mindset of the organization could disappear. Simply. Yeah. So I would say internalization of the change of the mindset of society. And when I look at the role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, is that really the role of the advocacy and moral education in the society, because usually the ministries of foreign affairs are the first ones which know and which could observe what is the standard in the world and what is not standard anymore. And here I felt a very strong role what we as an institution should play, because again, with your changes in your institution, you can go as fast as the mindset of society is prepared to absorb to accept the changes. You can lead as an example. You can be example in the public sector, but if the general mindset of society is different, then there are limits to it.
Yes, thank you for this, Ingrid. Ursula, the mindset is very important in having the infrastructure and having also male colleagues to help you along with this, especially the younger generation. Given all your experience as well, I mean, do you feel it's changing? As Ingrid was saying, the mindset, it takes such a long time to change a mindset, to internalize change, to explain why it's necessary. I mean, we're in the majority, but we're still in the minority. We care about children and education and opportunity and women's rights and healthcare, the whole myriad of issues which seem never to get on the table when, just in my experience, when there's one or two women in a room of men talking about, frankly, their experiences, and they try to compete with each other. And I actually feel that when with a group of women, you're just not trying to problem solve and get the goods together to make a difference. Ursula, did you make a difference?
Well, that's a question I ask myself often, and I must say I'm not convinced I did. So I have two remarks I wanted to make to what Ingrid said. We are a majority. The danger is that we continue to behave as if we were a minority. That is the terrible thing, you know, and this is why I'm against women crowding in the corner of the room. So I've always been battling with the battle call, women, don't push yourselves into a corner of the room. Interact with the man, take the man along. Now, one experience I've made with my former chief of staff, when he took over a big unit in the foreign ministry, he came after a couple of days to share with me the experience. He said, you know, when I called my first leadership meeting, I was surprised to find only men around the table. It sounded really strange and wrong. I was not used to this, so I started laughing, and he changed things. He started feeling that this was, you know, a lesser team in the sense of input, in the sense of views and voices. So I think this is what we want to achieve. That's one thing. And the second thing I have learned, and this is autocritical self-criticism, I think we need an institutional anchor for the female issue. This is what I missed, what I did not do in the foreign ministry. I met the other day the guy who's in charge of our disarmament unit in the foreign ministry, 8 people in the Austrian foreign ministry doing that. And I told him straight into his face and shocked him, I should have taken all 8 of you and put you into a transversal, as Ingrid said, women in international affairs unit, because it's a matter of security, it's a matter of development, it's a legal issue. It is a cultural issue, obviously. It's an environmental issue. I mean, there are all these issues concerned, and a budgetary issue. I mean, gender budgeting also in development cooperation is so important. So it's a deeply religious and cultural issue. So we should deal with it. And unless we do it explicitly, it doesn't come by itself. So one of the things I regret few things, but that's the one thing I regret. I should have instituted the whole thing inside the foreign ministry, created an administrative unit, an Abteilung or a section if possible, for women, female issues. Difficult to frame because I would have probably tried to call it women in international affairs.
Ingrid.
Yes, I would very much agree with that idea, or that step, institutional anchor. I like that expression very much. And what we established in our ministry was the position of coordinator or ambassador, special envoy for women, for gender issues, inclusion and diversity. So to have authority within the organization, which would who would lead this agenda. But what I consider as a very important is that to have more women in decision-making positions. Because not only, sometimes this discussion is limited to the number of ambassadors in our foreign service. But no, I think more important is to have women in decision-making positions in the headquarters who could shape the policy of the organization. I think that so far in the case of Slovakia, trend has been good. Of course, it doesn't go so fast as we would wish, but again, the organization need to digest. The second point is that we need men on board. It is not only about women. So if we want to internalize this agenda successfully, men need to be on board. And as you have said, it is also a generational aspect, that young generation of men looks at this agenda totally from different angle, like our older all the colleagues. So the inclusion, the respect for diversity, it is very important to create the corporate culture with the mutual respect and understanding of needs of all groups of social groups among the employees. Yes, I very much agree. Third point, the solidarity, networking, coaching among women. Solidarity, I would emphasize, because there is very often we feel among ourselves that there is not sufficient solidarity among women to help each other. Also, examples. What we have tried, for example, small things in our organization. We organized the photo exhibition, which now will rotate and will be combined with the discussion at the universities to encourage young women as example, with the examples that it is possible, and there is a role for women to play in international politics.
Thank you, Ingrid, for this. Can I just say to our audience outside, don't hesitate to raise the little clip at the bottom of the screen. There's a little hand there. Look, where's the little hand? You can always raise your little hand if you want to ask a question, or else put it on the chat. And if I could broaden it out a little, Ursula and Ingrid, the issue of war and wars. We look at the Russia war in Ukraine, the abuse of women, the rape, the kidnapping of children. We look at the wars in African countries, how women are abused and raped, and how rape is an instrument of oppression and war. We see it in many countries, and I notice how NATO has changed so much in dealing with these issues inside the organization and trying to promote this. But is there any way of, I mean, we're living in comfort zones in many ways, even though we are a majority, but we're a minority in terms of power distribution. We're living in a comfort zone called Europe. But outside this comfort zone is fear, abuse, rape, deprivation, no education for children, miserable health. How do we connect our views with the courageous women in these countries who are trying to make a difference?
Well, it is, if I may start, it is a painful issue, because we also have to be careful who sit in the comfort zone, not to be deceived by what we perceive as progress. I'm a lawyer by training. And if you look at the legal developments of the last decades, I mean, things have improved about women. If you look at the statute, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, if you look at also what the Criminal Court does, sexual violence as an instrument of war, as a feature, regular, terrible feature of violent conflict has become an issue. But how do you really act? What can you do if you have such diverse developments as we see in Afghanistan, where there's literally very little to nothing we can do right now, and where we had to abandon, all of us in a way, the women who have tried so courageously to move their societies ahead. And if we look at Iran, where the experience is so dreadful on one side. On the other side, Iran will go down into history as the first country where you had this rallying cry of freedom, women, life.
Yes.
Which is something that was carried not only by the courageous women in Iran, but by many, many men.
That's right.
And the way the regime reacts is, for me, a stark reminder that this is, they are aware of the danger that comes from the women. It's not for nothing that Malala Yousafzai was made the, I'm sorry, my telephone is ringing. Malala Yousafzai received the Nobel Prize for Peace, although, or maybe because she was shot on the way to school. So what authoritarian dictators hate the most, fear the most, is educated women.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a road without serpentines, obstacles, and drawbacks. It's not one way only. And that's a terrible recognition of a very terrible reality from my point of view.
It's also says something about extraordinary bravery of women. I've opened up the floor, Ursula and Ingrid, to our listeners, and I have a question from Ingrid Krivete. I've got to actually, there's conflict of interest here. Ingrid. Indra works in our office, the Carnegie Europe office in Brussels. But Indra has a great question here. You mentioned the importance of men being on board. How can we engage more men and get them to better understand the injustices and obstacles women face? From your experience, is there anything in particular that works well? Thank you, Indra.
Yes, I think I can share with you experience from our ministry that what is important that that not only men but the political leadership of the organization need to be on board. And of course, as we have in the political leadership, we had a minister and 2 state secretaries. I was the only woman. But from the first moment, the minister was on board and the other state secretary. And some of the activities which we organized throughout the year, and we organized also Week of Women in Diplomacy every year around 8th of March. Some of the activities were organized by men. And so that's important that, there, my observation was that it was a generational aspect, the challenge, that younger men were more willing to be engaged in these kind of discussions, and they were coming with some practical steps what need to be introduced in the organization to improve the corporate culture, but also conditions for employment. If I may say a few remarks to your previous question, you mentioned war and different conflicts in the world. Of course, these are the global challenges, and first of all, we need to create awareness about the impact of these conflicts in different countries around the world. It's not only Ukraine, it's not only Middle East, and we shouldn't be, as a community, global community, ignorant to that. And I think a very good playing field for that is the UN platform, the UN organization. And so there were many resolutions adopted related to the women, peace and security. I think what is important that we have the framework to improve the living standard, which is the global agenda, the sustainable development goals. Each country has the means and instruments how to help with the practical assistance through the ODA instruments and official development assistance instruments, and to be focused and to mainstream gender agenda into the practical projects in respected countries in Africa or in Middle East or everywhere else. Also, what is important is to use the international organizations to set standards, and also to be focused on statistics, to move from emotions from this debate, and really to have to achieve the evidence-based debate and evidence-based approach, and to be more kind of more accurate
Yeah.
to point out to the challenges and problems. And also what helps always are the comparative studies and different indexes like the gender equality index and so on. So really it's always very good mirror to respected countries where they are and what policies they would need to implement to have the different standard in their countries.
Yeah, it's very important you raise this, Ingrid, because the UNDP has been doing really very important work on this, on literacy, on education, on women's access to the institutions and the whole structures of power. But it's very complex, because what one doesn't want is the West imposing their values on other countries. And the other aspect is the enormous importance of empowerment on the ground. It is so important. The networks, and I don't want to always use this word civil society, but just empowerment, that women can stand up and feel secure. And security, without security, the way forward is so limited. And it's a kind of cul-de-sac. And before you came on the show, Ingrid, Ursula was talking about the element of security. Without security, you can do so little. And security means safety. And if you are safe and you feel safe, then you can look ahead and have a perspective. And I think this is a very important issue. I've got a question to both of the ladies here. And it's from an anonymous attendee. And it says, I think Ingrid and Ursula, we will have to make the answers quite brief, because I think there'll be more questions. Could the speakers share a personal story when they have been involved in negotiations and they've been clearly seen the need for gender-sensitive solutions that might have not been noticed by men negotiators? Do you want me to repeat that question? Could the speakers share a personal story when they've been involved in negotiations and they have clearly seen the need for gender-sensitive solutions that might have not been noticed by the men negotiators? Ooh, that's quite a complex question. It's a difficult one. Bitte, yeah, Ursula.
I have two examples, if I may.
Yeah.
One is because you mentioned UNDP. I mean, from my recollection, I might not be completely accurate, because I've been out of this type of business for a while. But in my memory, the Arab Human Development Report of 2005 was a groundbreaking issue.
Yeah.
Why? Because it just avoided what you have been mentioning, which is to get the Western perspective sort of put on the societies that work a bit differently. And the effort that was made and made it so remarkable for me and my work was that scientists, women, scholars from the region were participating in establishing that report. It was not a report produced in New York. Now, do we have regional human development reports annually? I don't think we do. We should urgently pick it up, because this is exactly what we need. I agree totally with Ingrid. She must be an economist to be focused on statistics from her background, because it's completely true. This is this is what men understand. You know, they don't want to deal with emotions. Yeah. They want to have statistics, and this is the best way to get statistics. So one of my experiences was really that I regretted very much that this practice at UN level of establishing regional African human development report would be so fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's do it. It doesn't cost the world. It could be something that could be done.
Yeah.
And the second issue I wanted to make, because it always struck me as a lawyer, you know, I have this legal mind. So when I was working with the women in the Balkans, with the women networks in the Balkans, they conveyed to me that their idea of corruption was totally different from my own. For them, corruption, for the regular woman in regular life, if you allow that strange expression, I mean, corruption or anti-corruption means that you don't have to pay for getting a date with the doctor,
Exactly.
a place at school, a place at kindergarten, at university. It's you can access this without having to bribe anybody. For us, the lawyers, including me and the people on the decision-taking level in Brussels and elsewhere, anti-corruption, legal rule of law means institutions and the training of people who then make these institutions work. It's not only that. It has a different component. It
Absolutely.
has a female component. And I've been trying to put it on the table all that time.
I think this is a great intervention, Ursula. One thing about the UNDP, I completely agree with you. The really good one, the good report in Egypt, it was done by the people on the ground. It wasn't the UN, it was the people on the ground having the courage, the intelligence, the conviction to say, this is what it's really like. Ingrid, you're in the hot seat now. You have to answer this question.
Yeah,
thank you, Ursula, for the great intervention.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this experience. I do not have a direct experience with the negotiations, but maybe two aspects what I would like to mention. First is that what we managed, and I think that was quite a revolutionary step, was that one of the mainstreaming agenda in our ODA, Official Development Assistance projects of Slovak ODA, are the gender issues. So the empowering the women in the countries where we provide development assistance. So through all the projects, this aspect, together with the green agenda, with the green transition, is the aspect which is mainstream into the all projects, and somehow it brought this agenda to the attention of all stakeholders that we care also in the in other countries to be focused on this agenda. Second aspect that not negotiations, but since maybe during the last 3 years, what we have been trying, women in diplomacy and at the ministry, to really always think about when the strategic documents of the ministry were prepared, that this aspect was the kind of natural part of these strategic documents, and you can see this trend also in the strategic documents of international organizations like NATO, right? Or so maybe 5 years ago, this agenda hasn't been mainstreamed so much, but this is very promising and positive trend.
Just listening to both of you, and it really, I was going to say, it doesn't matter where we live, whether it's Europe or Ukraine or Russia, Central Asia or Africa, and we see what's happening in Central America. Education is key.
Yeah.
It's just key for human development, for perspective, for generating respect, equality. We have to be very careful how we use the word because you can throw it around. But without education, we don't deal with demography, we don't deal with employment, we don't deal with climate change. In both of your experiences, does education has been a big plank of your agendas?
Well, if I may start, for me, the key word, I started with education as the key word of all efforts. I have the same observation that Ingrid has. It's a lot of it is generational. When I was teaching for 8 years at Sciences Po in Paris, must say my male students, and I raised the issue of 1325 at every single course. And I was worried because the majority of the students were women. So I thought the few boys are going to be frightened off by that subject matter. And it was not true. It was not true. They were really interested and they were really making interesting contributions. So it changes the conversation. One thing is generational, and that certainly has to do with education. For me, the the biggest issue now is access, because I think that that's the broadest issue: access to information, access to money, access to finance, access to power networks, access to education, access to institutions. I mean, that is so important, because if you don't have the access to information to start with, how do you start?
Absolutely.
You know. So
Absolutely.
I would rather frame it in terms of a global issue now with access.
Very, very good point, Ursula. A tiny little intervention. Handies, cell phones, whatever you call them, mobile phones. Women in Pakistan, the little micro industry setups, they were given cell phones and how to download their banking statements and everything. It was a huge positive explosion in women being liberated and getting their own little businesses off the ground. And this is the element of education and technology, marrying both of them. Ingrid, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to complement what was said by Ursula, that access, I think it frames very well all that package, what would be needed, but education, empowerment, and then equal opportunities. So that's the 3E.
The 3E is very, very difficult, but we have to keep trying. I'm not so sure we have time for the last question by Francesca Marimonti, a researcher at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. It's a very long question. I'll try to cut it down. You both mentioned the importance of having men siding on this important change we need to make. However, we see many women in power and in leadership positions that do not add that feminist angle.
Yeah.
Well, this is quite tricky to foreign policy, which you were mentioning. They reproduce and reinforce the very dynamics that men have set up. Have you encountered many of these? Can I jump in here? The German foreign minister is really making a big change, and so is the Moldova foreign minister, who I think, yes, I know him, Niku Popescu, and the Slovaks have. But
Sweden, yeah.
But quick jump in, Ingrid and Ursula, because if we bring in the feminist issue, then we're going down the road to another.
It has been a kind of trend that many foreign services or the diplomacies have this feminist diplomacy strategy. Not only Germany, Spain. I think beginning was Sweden was the pioneer in that. But interestingly, Sweden left that expression, that strategy. I think what is however we would call it, I think what is important to be focused on practicalities in the daily life of the ministry, to really to make a better environment, and not to put women in the position that to make compromise between the private life and their career. So really I think we managed to introduce in some of the concrete steps in our organization, which improved the life of women and empowered the women in the organization.
Thank you, Ingrid. Ursula, a quick little answer, and then we have to wrap it up.
Well, feminist foreign policy has become something of a compulsory label. I'm not entirely happy with this. I think this labeling tends to have the risk of becoming self-congratulatory. I'm totally in agreement with Ingrid. We need practical, concrete focus, and we also need male role models who get engaged on that
point,
pro-women agenda.
That's really, really important. I mean, what both of you say, need the transparency of appointments, the transparency of the career track, the flexibility, and couples to a foreign posting instead of disrupting all their family lives or their personal lives or whatever. Look, tempus fugit. The time flies. Thank you very much, both of you. It was very, very engaging. And this fits our title, EU Engage. which is set up and funded by the EU Horizon 2020 programme. And this has been hosted by GLOBSEC CEE. It's been very, very stimulating. And thank you very much, both of you. Thank you for the organisers. Thank you for GLOBSEC. And of course, thank you for our wonderful audience and the great questions. Hope we'll see you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ingrid.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.